The Napa Valley sun cast a golden glow over the vineyard. White roses and twinkling lights decorated the outdoor wedding venue where Eleanor Morgan was getting married to Jeffrey Collins. Everyone who was anyone in Silicon Valley was there, dressed in their finest clothes, sipping expensive champagne. Malcolm Ray sat alone at a table in the corner, as far from the happy couple as possible. At 31, Malcolm was one of the youngest billionaires in the tech world. His company, Ray Tech, had revolutionized the smartphone industry with innovative security software. His success story was legendary. A self-made man who started coding in his garage and now owned one of the most valuable companies in America. But today, all that success meant nothing. Malcolm watched as Elena, the woman he had once planned to marry, danced with Jeffrey, his former business partner and friend. The betrayal still felt fresh, even though it had been 8 months since he'd discovered them together. "You're a fool for coming," Malcolm muttered to himself, taking another sip of his scotch. The amber liquid burned his throat, but it did nothing to dull the ache in his chest. He straightened his charcoal grey suit and adjusted his tie. Malcolm had always been handsome, tall with broad shoulders, dark hair and piercing blue eyes. Women constantly tried to catch his attention, especially now that he was single and worth billions, but he'd built walls around himself since Elena's betrayal. Malcolm watched as the bride and groom cut their cake. Elena looked beautiful in her white dress, her blonde hair perfectly styled. Jeffrey kept his arm around her waist, smiling for the photographers. They looked perfect together, the power couple of Silicon Valley. "I should leave," Malcolm said, but he couldn't move. Leaving would make him look weak, like he couldn't handle seeing them together. He had an image to maintain. The business world was watching. The gossip blogs were watching. Everyone wanted to see how Malcolm Ray would handle this humiliation. Just as Malcolm was about to down the rest of his scotch and make his exit, he felt someone's presence beside him. "You look like you could use some company." Malcolm looked up to see a woman he didn't recognize. She was stunning, tall and slender, with smooth dark skin and curly black hair that fell past her shoulders. She wore a simple burgundy dress that hugged her curves, but it was her eyes that caught his attention, warm, intelligent, and filled with genuine concern. "Do I know you?" Malcolm asked, his tone sharper than he intended. The woman shook her head. "No, my name is Zariah Ellis. I'm here with my roommate Lisa. She works in wine distribution." She gestured toward a group of people near the bar. "And you're Malcolm Ray? Let me guess. You recognized me from Forbes magazine and thought you'd try your luck?" Malcolm had grown used to women approaching him for his money. Zariah raised an eyebrow. "Actually, I recognized you as the man sitting alone at a wedding, looking like he's trying not to fall apart. I thought you might want to dance." Malcolm was taken aback by her directness. "Dance? Why would I want to dance?" "Because it's better than sitting here torturing yourself," Zariah said simply. She held out her hand. "Dance with me, just so you're not alone right now." Something in her voice, the genuine kindness with no hint of pity, made Malcolm put down his glass. Against his better judgment, he stood up and took her hand. As they walked to the dance floor, Malcolm felt people watching. He saw the whispers behind hands, the curious glances. Everyone wanted to know who the mystery woman was with Malcolm Ray. The band was playing a slow song. Malcolm placed his hand respectfully on Zariah's back, keeping a proper distance between them as they began to move to the music. "So," Malcolm said after a moment of silence, "why did you really come over to my table?" Zariah looked directly into his eyes. "Because you looked like someone trying not to break in public." Her honesty surprised him. "And what if I was? Then let me be the stranger you break next to," she said softly. Malcolm felt something crack inside him, not in a painful way, but like ice breaking on a frozen lake at the first sign of spring. "I shouldn't have come today," he admitted. "Probably not," Zariah agreed. "But you did, and now you're dancing instead of hiding in the corner." Malcolm found himself studying her face. "You're not from around here, are you? I know most people in the tech world. I teach poetry at Valley Community College," Zariah explained. "I'm also a freelance writer. I do a wedding column for the local paper sometimes. Nothing as exciting as creating billion-dollar tech companies." Malcolm was surprised to find himself genuinely interested. "Poetry? What kind?" "The kind that makes people feel less alone," Zariah said with a small smile. "Isn't that what all art should do?" As they continued to dance, Malcolm became aware that Elena was watching them from across the room. Her expression was unreadable, but Malcolm felt a small satisfaction that he wasn't the one sitting alone anymore. "Your ex?" Zariah asked, noticing the direction of his gaze. "Is it that obvious?" "A little. She keeps looking over here." Malcolm sighed. We were engaged. She left me for my business partner, the groom. Zariah winced. Ouch. And you came to their wedding? That's either very brave or very masochistic. Maybe both, Malcolm admitted. I told myself I needed closure, that I had to show everyone I was fine. And are you? Fine? Malcolm looked down at her. No one had asked him that question in months, not in a way that invited an honest answer. No, he said simply. But I'm getting there. The song ended, but another slow one began. Neither of them moved to leave the dance floor. Tell me something about poetry, Malcolm said, surprising himself with the request. What do you want to know? Why do you write it? Zariah thought for a moment. Because some feelings are too big for regular words. Sometimes you need to reshape language to make room for the truth. Malcolm nodded slowly. I've never thought about it that way. Most people don't, Zariah said. They think poetry is just pretty words arranged nicely on a page. But real poetry is about saying the unsayable. As they danced, Malcolm noticed that he was no longer thinking about Elena or Jeffrey, or the whispers of the other guests. For the first time in months, he was present in the moment, focused on the conversation and the warm hand in his. Thank you, he said suddenly. For what? For coming over? For the dance? For... Malcolm struggled to find the right words. For seeing me. Zariah smiled, and Malcolm felt something stir inside him, something he thought had died when Elena left. When the song ended, Zariah stepped back. I should get back to my friend. She'll wonder where I disappeared to. Malcolm surprised himself by feeling disappointed. Right, of course. It was nice meeting you, Malcolm Ray, Zariah said, turning to leave. Wait, Malcolm called after her. Will I see you again? Zariah paused, considering him with those thoughtful eyes. Do you want to? Malcolm didn't hesitate. Yes. Then I'm sure you will. With that, she walked away, disappearing into the crowd of wedding guests. Malcolm returned to his table, but the crushing weight of loneliness didn't follow him back. He watched as Zariah rejoined her group of friends, laughing at something someone said. She didn't look back at him, didn't try to catch his eye or signal him in any way. It was refreshing, her lack of need for his attention or approval. For the first time since entering the wedding, Malcolm was glad he had come. If he hadn't, he would never have met the intriguing woman in the burgundy dress who had seen past his wealth and status to the pain he was trying so hard to hide. As the evening progressed, Malcolm found his eyes constantly searching for Zariah in the crowd. He saw her dancing with her friends, chatting with the bartender, admiring the vineyard's landscape. She seemed so at ease, so natural in any setting. When the bride and groom prepared to leave, guests lined up to throw rose petals. Malcolm stood at the back, going through the motions. As Elena and Jeffrey ran through the shower of petals toward their waiting car, Malcolm felt a presence beside him. Still hanging in there? Zariah asked, appearing at his side. Malcolm nodded. Actually, I am. Good, she smiled. The stars are out. Want to take a walk? Without waiting for his answer, Zariah turned and walked toward a path that led through the vineyard. Malcolm followed, leaving behind the noise and lights of the reception. The night air was cool and fragrant with the scent of grapes. Strings of fairy lights illuminated the path between the rows of vines. Above them, the stars shone brightly in the clear California sky. It's beautiful here, Zariah said, stopping under a wooden trellis covered in vines and tiny white lights. It is, Malcolm agreed, though he was looking at her rather than the scenery. You know, Zariah said, turning to face him, most people would have left that wedding hours ago if they were in your position. I'm not most people. Clearly, Zariah studied him. Why did you really stay, Malcolm? Malcolm considered lying, giving her the same answer he'd given himself about closure and appearances, but something about Zariah made him want to tell the truth. I don't know, he admitted. Pride, maybe. Or maybe I needed to see it for myself, see them together and know for sure that it's over. And is it over? Malcolm thought about Elena, about the pain that had consumed him for months. It was still there, but it felt different now, more distant, less sharp. Yes, he said, realizing as he spoke that it was true. It's over. Zariah smiled. Good. New beginnings are hard to find when you're still holding on to old endings. You sound like a greeting card, Malcolm said with a small laugh. Occupational hazard of being a poet, Zariah replied with a shrug. Sometimes the truth is a little cheesy. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the lights twinkle among the vines. I don't know your last name, Malcolm said suddenly. Ellis, Zariah Ellis. Zariah Ellis, Malcolm repeated, liking the way it sounded. "I'd like to see you again, Zariah Ellis." "Would you?" she asked, her expression unreadable. "Or do you just want a distraction from your pain?" The question caught Malcolm off guard. Most women would have jumped at the chance to see him again, especially knowing his wealth and status. "I want to know you," Malcolm said honestly. "Not as a distraction, as a person." Zariah seemed to consider this. "I'm not sure that's a good idea." "Why not?" "Because people like you don't usually want people like me for long," she said simply. "I'm not part of your world, Malcolm. I teach community college classes and write poetry that hardly anyone reads. You run a billion-dollar company and attend galas with celebrities." "Maybe I'm tired of my world," Malcolm said softly. Zariah shook her head. "You're hurting right now. Pain makes us reach for comfort wherever we can find it. I was happy to be your comfort tonight, but I'm not interested in being someone's temporary bandage." Malcolm was surprised by her words. He wasn't used to rejection, not since he'd made his fortune. "That's not what I'm offering," he insisted. "Maybe not intentionally," Zariah conceded. "But I know how these things go. The billionaire meets the ordinary girl, feels something different, something real. Then the novelty wears off and he remembers all the models and socialites waiting in line." "That's not fair," Malcolm said, a hint of anger in his voice. "You don't know me." "You're right, I don't," Zariah agreed. "And you don't know me either. That's my point." She turned to leave, but Malcolm gently caught her hand. "So let's change that," he said. "Let me know you. Let me prove that I'm not just looking for a distraction." Zariah looked down at his hand holding hers, then back up at his face. For a long moment she said nothing. "One coffee," she finally said. "That's all I'm agreeing to." Malcolm smiled, feeling a surge of something he hadn't felt in a long time. "Hope. One coffee," he agreed. "For now." As they walked back toward the reception, Malcolm realized that for the first time since entering the wedding venue, he wasn't thinking about Elena or Jeffrey or his broken heart. Instead, his mind was filled with thoughts of poetry and starlight, and the woman walking beside him who had seen his pain and offered him not pity, but presence. The wedding that had begun as a reminder of all he had lost had somehow become the beginning of something new, something unexpected and fragile and full of possibility. 3 days after the wedding, Malcolm sat in his corner office on the top floor of the Ray Tech building in downtown San Francisco. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a stunning view of the bay, but he wasn't looking at the scenery. Instead, his eyes were fixed on his computer screen, where he had just typed Zariah Ellis into the search bar. His assistant, Tara, knocked on the door and entered with a stack of papers. "The contracts for the Johnson merger are ready for your signature," she said, placing them on his desk. "And the board wants to know if you're attending the charity gala next weekend." Malcolm nodded absently. "Tell them I'll be there." Tara lingered, noticing his distraction. "Is everything okay, Mr. Ray?" Malcolm closed his laptop. "Fine, just researching something." "The tech blogs are talking about you, by the way," Tara said. "Someone posted photos of you at the wedding, dancing with an unknown woman. People are speculating." Malcolm frowned. "Let them speculate, it's none of their business." After Tara left, Malcolm reopened his laptop. His search had yielded several results. Zariah Ellis taught poetry and creative writing at Valley Community College. She had a small blog where she published some of her work. She had also written a self-published book of poetry called Whispers Between Strangers. Malcolm clicked on a link to the college website. Zariah taught classes on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Today was Wednesday. Her afternoon class started at 2 p.m. Malcolm checked his watch. It was 1:15. Without allowing himself to overthink it, Malcolm called Tara on the intercom. "Cancel my meetings for the rest of the day," he said. "Something's come up." 30 minutes later, Malcolm pulled his silver Porsche into the parking lot of Valley Community College. The campus was small and modest, nothing like the prestigious universities that regularly invited Malcolm to give guest lectures. He found the English department building and followed the signs to room 204. The hallway was quiet, most students already in their classrooms. Malcolm peered through the small window in the door and saw Zariah standing at the front of the room. She wore a simple blue blouse and black pants, her curly hair tied back in a loose ponytail. She was gesturing animatedly as she spoke to a classroom of about 20 students. Malcolm hesitated, suddenly unsure of his impulsive decision to come here. What was he doing? He was Malcolm Ray, tech billionaire, CEO of one of the most valuable companies in America. He didn't chase after women. They chased him. But Zariah wasn't like other women. She had walked away from him at the wedding, setting a clear boundary. "One coffee," she had said. Yet here he was, showing up unannounced at her workplace. Before he could talk himself out of it, Malcolm opened the door and slipped quietly into the back row of the classroom. A few students turned to look at him, but most kept their attention on Zariah. Poetry isn't about using fancy words to sound smart, she was saying. It's about finding the right words to express something true, something real. Malcolm smiled to himself. Her words reminded him of their conversation at the wedding. For next week, I want you to write a poem about an ordinary moment that changed you, Zariah continued. It doesn't have to be dramatic. Often the most important moments in our lives seem small when they're happening. She looked up and scanned the classroom, her eyes eventually landing on Malcolm in the back row. Her expression registered surprise, then confusion, but she quickly recovered and continued her lesson. Remember, be specific in your details. Don't tell me the sunset was beautiful. Tell me it turned the sky the color of ripe peaches and how the light made your mother's face look young again. The class continued for another 30 minutes. Malcolm watched as Zariah engaged with her students, encouraging some, challenging others. She was a natural teacher, passionate and patient. When the class ended, students gathered their things and filed out. Several stopped to ask Zariah questions. Malcolm waited, feeling increasingly out of place in his expensive suit among the casually dressed students. Finally, the last student left, and Zariah approached him, arms crossed over her chest. Most people call before they show up at someone's workplace, she said, but there was a hint of amusement in her voice. I wanted to surprise you, Malcolm said, standing up. Mission accomplished. Zariah gathered her papers from the desk at the front of the room. How did you find me? I searched for you online, Malcolm admitted. I hope that's not too creepy. It's a little creepy, Zariah said, but also somewhat flattering. The famous Malcolm Ray doing internet searches on a community college teacher. Malcolm smiled. I believe I was promised a coffee. Zariah raised an eyebrow. And you couldn't wait for me to call you? I didn't have your number, Malcolm pointed out. Fair point. Zariah checked her watch. I have office hours now, but I'm free at 4 if you want to wait. I'll wait, Malcolm said without hesitation. Zariah led him to a small office she shared with another teacher. The space was cramped, with 2 desks facing opposite walls and bookshelves crammed with well-worn paperbacks. Malcolm sat in a chair in the corner, while Zariah met with students who dropped in with questions about assignments. It was a world away from Malcolm's sleek, modern office, with its expensive furniture and original artwork. Yet there was something comforting about the simplicity of this space, with its smell of old books and coffee. At 4 o'clock, after the last student left, Zariah turned to Malcolm. Ready for that coffee? She asked. They walked to a small cafe just off campus. It was nothing like the upscale coffee shops Malcolm usually frequented. The furniture was mismatched, the menu was written on a chalkboard, and the barista greeted Zariah by name. The usual, Z, the young man behind the counter asked. Yes, please, Danny, and whatever my friend here wants, she gestured to Malcolm. Just black coffee, Malcolm said. They sat at a small table by the window. Outside, students hurried across the campus, some heading to evening classes, others to dormitories or parked cars. So, Zariah said after taking a sip of her latte, what brings a billionaire tech CEO to a community college poetry class? You, Malcolm said simply. I wanted to see you again. Zariah studied him over the rim of her coffee cup. Why? And don't say it's because I'm different or special or not like other women. Men always say that, and it never means what women think it means. Malcolm leaned back in his chair, considering her words. Fair enough. I wanted to see you again because you were honest with me at the wedding. You saw that I was hurting, and you didn't try to fix it or exploit it. You just stood next to me while I felt it. Zariah nodded slowly. Okay, that's a good answer. What about you? Malcolm asked. Why did you agree to coffee with me? Curiosity, Zariah admitted, and maybe a little bit of that same honesty you mentioned. There was something real about our conversation at the wedding. I don't experience that very often. Me neither, Malcolm said, especially since you became rich and famous, Zariah supplied. Malcolm nodded. People treat you differently when they want something from you. After a while you start to assume everyone wants something. And what do you think I want? Zariah asked directly. Malcolm met her gaze. I have no idea. That's what makes you interesting. Zariah laughed. A genuine, unguarded sound that made Malcolm smile. Well, I don't want your money if that's what you're wondering, she said. I live simply, but I have everything I need. What about what you want? Malcolm asked. Not just what you need. Zariah's expression turned thoughtful. What I want, she paused. I want to publish a real book of poetry someday, with a real publisher. I want my students to fall in love with words the way I did. I want to travel more. And I want to meet people who see me, really see me, not just what I can do for them, like you did for me at the wedding, Malcolm said softly. Yes, Zariah agreed, like that. They talked for 2 hours, long after their coffee cups were empty. Malcolm told Zariah about growing up poor, about teaching himself to code, about building his company from nothing. Zariah told him about her childhood in Oakland, about the teacher who introduced her to poetry, about her dreams of becoming a full-time writer. It was the most honest conversation Malcolm had had in years. With Eleanor, there had always been a performance aspect to their relationship, both of them playing the roles of successful power couple. With Zariah, there was no performance, just conversation. As the cafe prepared to close, Malcolm walked Zariah to her car, an old Honda with a dent in the passenger door. I had a nice time, Zariah said, fishing her keys from her purse. So did I, Malcolm replied. Can I see you again? Zariah hesitated. Malcolm, I meant what I said at the wedding. I don't want to be your rebound or your experiment in dating a normal person. That's not what this is, Malcolm insisted. Then what is it? Zariah challenged. Malcolm ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. I don't know yet, but I'd like the chance to find out. Zariah considered him for a long moment. Okay, we can see each other again, but let's take it slow. Slow, Malcolm agreed. I can do slow. Zariah smiled. Good. And next time call first instead of just showing up. I need your number for that, Malcolm pointed out. Zariah held out her hand. Give me your phone. Malcolm unlocked his phone and handed it to her. She entered her number, then returned it to him. Good night, Malcolm, she said, getting into her car. Good night, Zariah, he replied, watching as she drove away. On the drive back to his penthouse apartment, Malcolm couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in months, he felt something other than anger or pain or numbness. He felt hope. The next morning, Malcolm arrived at the office earlier than usual. He had a spring in his step that didn't go unnoticed by his staff. So you seem in a good mood today, Mr. Ray, Tara commented as she brought in his morning coffee. I am, Malcolm said. By the way, can you find out who funds Valley Community College? I'm interested in their arts program. Tara made a note. I'll look into it right away. Later that day, Malcolm received a text from Zariah. My students are still talking about the mysterious man in the suit who sat in the back of class yesterday. One of them Googled you. Now they think I'm dating a celebrity. Thanks for that. Malcolm grinned and typed a reply. Am I dating a celebrity? That seems presumptuous after one coffee. Her response came quickly. Definitely presumptuous. We'll need at least 3 coffees before I consider it dating. Challenge accepted, Malcolm texted back. Dinner tomorrow? I know a great Italian place. There was a longer pause before Zariah's reply. I thought we were doing coffee. We can have coffee for dessert, Malcolm suggested. Another pause, then, fine, but I'm paying for my half. Malcolm frowned at his phone. He wasn't used to women insisting on paying their own way. With Elena, money had never been an issue. She had been happy to let him spend lavishly on her. We'll discuss it tomorrow, he texted back. I'll pick you up at 7. I'll meet you there, Zariah countered. Text me the address. Malcolm shook his head, smiling at her stubbornness. She was determined to maintain her independence, and he found it both frustrating and refreshing. The next evening, Malcolm arrived at Bella Norte, an upscale Italian restaurant in downtown San Francisco 15 minutes early. He had reserved a private table in the back, away from prying eyes. As a well-known figure in the tech world, Malcolm was used to being recognized and photographed when he dined out. Zariah arrived precisely at 7, wearing a simple black dress that hugged her curves. Her hair was down, falling in natural curls around her shoulders. She looked beautiful in an understated way that made Malcolm's breath catch. You look amazing, he said, as the hostess led them to their table. Thank you, Zariah replied. This place is fancy. I'm a little out of my element. You don't look out of your element, Malcolm assured her. You look like you belong anywhere you choose to be. The waiter brought menus and recited the evening's specials. Malcolm noticed Zariah glancing at the prices, her expression carefully neutral. Order whatever you want, he said quietly. Please. Zariah met his eyes across the table. I told you I'm paying for my half. And I'm telling you that I invited you, so it's my treat, Malcolm countered. Next time you can choose the place and pay if you want. Zariah seemed to consider this, then nodded. Next time, she agreed. They ordered wine and pasta, and as they ate, the conversation flowed as easily as it had at the cafe. Malcolm found himself telling Zariah things he rarely shared with anyone, his insecurities about his success, his fears that he'd never be able to trust again after Elena's betrayal. "It's not just that she cheated," Malcolm explained. "It's that she did it with Jeffrey. He was my friend, my partner. We built the company together." "That's a double betrayal," Zariah said sympathetically. "No wonder you're guarded." "What about you?" Malcolm asked. "You seem cautious too." "Previous heartbreak." Zariah took a sip of her wine before answering. "A few. The last serious relationship I had was with another teacher at the college. He told me he loved my passion, my creativity. Then he got a job offer at a university across the country and left without even discussing it with me. Later I found out he'd been using my teaching ideas in his own work, passing them off as his." "I'm sorry," Malcolm said, genuinely angry on her behalf. Zariah shrugged. "It taught me to be careful about who I share myself with. People say they love your fire until it burns too bright for their comfort. I don't think you could burn too bright for me," Malcolm said without thinking. Zariah gave him a skeptical look. "You barely know me, Malcolm." "I'm getting to know you," he corrected, "and I like what I'm learning." After dinner, they walked along the waterfront. The night was cool, and Malcolm draped his jacket over Zariah's shoulders when he noticed her shivering. "Tell me about your poetry," Malcolm said, as they stood looking out at the lights reflected on the bay. "What do you want to know? What do you write about?" Zariah was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "Love, loss, the moments between people that change everything, the way we hide from each other and from ourselves." "Will you let me read some?" Malcolm asked. Zariah looked up at him, surprised. "You want to read my poetry?" "Yes," Malcolm said simply. "I want to know how you see the world." Zariah hesitated, then reached into her purse and pulled out a small book. "This is my self-published collection. It's not very good, but it's honest." Malcolm took the book, Whispers Between Strangers by Zariah Ellis. The cover was simple, black with white lettering. "Thank you," he said, understanding that she was sharing something precious with him. "I'll read it tonight." They continued walking, their hands occasionally brushing against each other. Malcolm wanted to take her hand in his, but he remembered his promise to take things slow. As they reached the end of the pier, Zariah turned to face him. "I should get home. I have an early class tomorrow." "I'll drive you," Malcolm offered. "I have my car," Zariah reminded him. "Right," Malcolm nodded, trying to hide his disappointment. "I'll walk you back to the restaurant parking lot then." As they walked back, Zariah said, "I had a nice time tonight, Malcolm. Thank you for dinner." "Thank you for joining me," Malcolm replied. "And for this." He held up the poetry book. When they reached Zariah's car, there was a moment of awkward silence. Malcolm wanted to kiss her, but he wasn't sure if she wanted him to. Before he could decide, Zariah stood on her tiptoes and pressed a quick, soft kiss to his cheek. "Good night, Malcolm," she said, getting into her car. "Good night, Zariah," he replied, touching his cheek where her lips had been. Later that night, Malcolm sat in his penthouse, reading Zariah's poetry by the light of a single lamp. Her words were raw and honest, beautiful in their simplicity. She wrote about love and loneliness, about the masks people wear, about the courage it takes to be seen. One poem in particular caught his attention. It was titled The Stranger's Dance. "We are all strangers, until someone sees our pain best and dances anyway." Malcolm read the short poem 3 times, thinking about the night of the wedding, about Zariah asking him to dance, about the way she had seen his pain and offered her presence instead of her pity. He fell asleep with the book on his chest, dreaming of dancing with Zariah under a sky full of stars. The next morning, Malcolm woke to a text from Tara with the information he had requested about Valley Community College. The college had been struggling financially for years. Their arts program was particularly underfunded, with potential cuts looming for the upcoming academic year. Malcolm sat up in bed, an idea forming in his mind. He picked up his phone and called his financial advisor. "Roger, I want to set up a donation to Valley Community College," Malcolm said, "specifically for their arts and humanities programs." "How much are we talking, Malcolm?" Roger asked. $5 million, Malcolm said without hesitation. "I want it done today." "That's very generous," Roger commented. "Any particular reason for this sudden philanthropy?" Malcolm thought about Zariah, about her passion for teaching, about the students whose lives she was changing with her words. "Let's just say I've developed an interest in poetry," Malcolm replied. A week after their dinner date, Zariah was in her classroom preparing for her morning poetry workshop when the dean of the college, Dr. Peterson, knocked on her door. "Zariah, do you have a minute?" he asked, his round face flushed with excitement. "Of course," Zariah said, putting down her stack of student papers. Is everything okay? Everything is wonderful, Dr. Peterson exclaimed, stepping into the classroom. The most amazing thing has happened. We've received a donation to the arts department. $5 million. Zariah's eyes widened. $5 million? That's incredible. From who? An anonymous donor, Dr. Peterson said. Well, anonymous to most, but as department head, I was informed. It's from Malcolm Ray, the tech billionaire. Zariah felt the blood drain from her face. Malcolm Ray, she repeated faintly. Yes, can you believe it? The Malcolm Ray! Dr. Peterson was practically bouncing with excitement. Apparently, he's developed an interest in our poetry program. This donation will save the entire arts department. We won't have to cut any classes or staff positions. In fact, we can expand. Zariah forced a smile. That's wonderful news. It gets better, Dr. Peterson continued. The board wants to honor Mr. Ray at our annual fundraising gala next month. We're hoping you'll write something to read at the ceremony, a poem expressing our gratitude. Me? Zariah asked weakly. Of course. You're our star poetry professor, and who knows, maybe you could give Mr. Ray a personal tour of the department when he visits. Show him what his money is supporting. After Dr. Peterson left, Zariah sank into her chair, her mind racing. Malcolm had donated $5 million to her college, right after she had told him about the financial struggles of the arts department. It couldn't be a coincidence. Anger built inside her. How dare he? She had made it clear she didn't want his money. And now he had done this, interfered in her workplace, made himself a hero to her colleagues, put her in a position where she would be expected to be grateful. Zariah pulled out her phone and dialed Malcolm's number. He answered on the second ring. Zariah, he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. I was just thinking about you. We need to talk, Zariah said coldly. Now, there was a pause. Is everything okay? No, everything is not okay. $5 million, really, Malcolm? Another pause. Ah, you found out about the donation. Yes, I found out. The entire college is buzzing about it. The dean just asked me to write a poem thanking you for your generosity. I was trying to help, Malcolm said, his voice defensive. I didn't ask for your help, Zariah snapped. I told you I don't want your money. The donation wasn't for you, Malcolm argued. It was for the college, for the arts program you care about. Don't pretend this isn't about me, Zariah said. You never even heard of Valley Community College until you met me. Zariah, please, Malcolm said. Can we talk about this in person? I have meetings all day, but I could come by your place tonight. Fine, Zariah agreed, still angry. 8 o'clock, I'll text you my address. She hung up without saying goodbye and put her head in her hands. How had things gotten so complicated so quickly? For the rest of the day, Zariah struggled to focus on her classes. Her students noticed her distraction, but she brushed off their concerns with a forced smile. At 8 o'clock that evening, her doorbell rang. Zariah took a deep breath, steeling herself before opening the door to her small apartment. Malcolm stood in the hallway, still in his business suit but without a tie, his dark hair slightly disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it. He held a bouquet of wildflowers. I thought flowers might help my apology, he said with a hesitant smile. This isn't something you can fix with flowers, Malcolm, Zariah said, but she took the bouquet and stepped aside to let him in. Malcolm entered her apartment, looking around with interest. It was small but cozy, with bookshelves lining every available wall space. Framed poems and artwork hung on the walls, and a comfortable-looking sofa was positioned near a window that overlooked a small park. Nice place, Malcolm commented. It's not a penthouse with a view of the bay, but it's home, Zariah replied, putting the flowers in a vase. I like it, Malcolm said sincerely. It suits you. Zariah crossed her arms. Let's talk about why you're really here. The donation. Malcolm sighed, running a hand through his hair as Zariah had suspected he'd been doing earlier. I was trying to do something good. You told me about the financial problems at the college, about the potential cuts to the arts program. I have money. A lot of money. Why shouldn't I use it to support something you care about? Because it complicates things between us, Zariah explained, her anger softening slightly at his genuine confusion. Now when people see us together, they'll wonder if I'm with you because of your money. My colleagues will expect me to be your personal cheerleader at the college. It changes the dynamic. Malcolm sat down on the sofa, looking troubled. I didn't think about it that way. I'm used to solving problems with money. It's easy for me. That's exactly the issue, Zariah said, sitting beside him. What's easy for you is life-changing for other people. $5 million is nothing to you, but it's everything to my college. That kind of power imbalance it's hard to navigate in a relationship. Is that what we have? A relationship? Malcolm asked quietly. Zariah looked at him, at the vulnerability in his eyes. I don't know what we have, Malcolm. We barely know each other. We've had coffee once and dinner once. And now you've donated $5 million to my workplace. I'm sorry, Malcolm said. I didn't mean to make things difficult for you. I wanted to do something for you, something that mattered. If you want to do something for me, try asking what I need first, Zariah suggested gently. Malcolm nodded. Fair enough. What do you need, Zariah? The directness of the question caught her off guard. I need more equality. I need to know that you see me as a person, not a charity case or a project. I need to know that you respect my independence. I do see you, Malcolm insisted. That's why I'm here. That's why I keep coming back. Zariah studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. All she saw was sincerity and a hint of uncertainty that made him seem much younger than his 31 years. The donation, she said finally. Can you make it anonymous, truly anonymous, so it's not connected to me at all? Malcolm hesitated. It might be too late for that. The dean already knows it's from me. Then can you at least decline the public recognition? No ceremony, no plaque with your name on it. Malcolm nodded. I can do that. I'll call tomorrow and tell them I prefer to remain in the background. Thank you, Zariah said, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Malcolm reached out and tentatively took her hand. I'm still learning how to do this, he admitted. How to be with someone who doesn't want the things most people want from me. And what do most people want from you? Zariah asked. Money, status, connections, the reflected glory of being seen with me. Malcolm's voice was bitter. Elena, she loved the lifestyle more than she loved me. I see that now. Zariah squeezed his hand. I'm not Elena. I have my own life, my own work that fulfills me. I don't need your money or your connections. What do you need? Malcolm asked again. Zariah considered the question. Honesty, respect. Someone who sees me clearly and isn't afraid of what they see. I can do that, Malcolm said softly. If you'll let me. Zariah looked at their joined hands. I'm still angry about the donation. I know, I'm sorry. But, she continued, I appreciate that you came here to apologize. That you're listening to me. Malcolm brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. I want to get this right, Zariah. I want to get us right. Something warm unfurled in Zariah's chest at his words. We're still taking it slow, she reminded him. Slow, Malcolm agreed. At your pace. They spent the rest of the evening talking about books they loved, places they'd traveled, dreams they still held. Malcolm told Zariah about his childhood in a small apartment in Oakland, where his mother had worked 2 jobs to support him after his father left. Zariah shared stories about her grandmother, who had raised her and encouraged her love of poetry. It was nearly midnight when Malcolm reluctantly stood to leave. Can I see you this weekend? He asked. Maybe we could go to that bookstore you mentioned, the one with the poetry readings. Zariah smiled, pleased that he had remembered. I'd like that. At the door, Malcolm paused. Zariah, about the donation. I know you're still upset, but I hope someday you'll understand that I did it because I care about what you care about, not to show off or control you. Zariah nodded. I know your intentions were good, just no more grand gestures without talking to me first, okay? Promise, Malcolm said, leaning down to kiss her cheek. After he left, Zariah touched the spot where his lips had been, her feelings a complicated mix of wariness and hope. On Saturday, Malcolm and Zariah went to Verses and Volumes, a small independent bookstore that hosted weekly poetry readings. Zariah was well known there. She had given readings of her own work several times. Zariah, the elderly owner, Mrs. Jenkins, called out when they entered. So good to see you, dear. Are you reading tonight? Not tonight, Mrs. Jenkins, Zariah replied with a smile. Just here to listen. This is my friend, Malcolm. Mrs. Jenkins shook Malcolm's hand, giving him a curious once-over. Nice to meet you, young man. Any friend of Zariah's is welcome here. Malcolm and Zariah found seats near the back of the small performance area. The space was intimate, just a few rows of mismatched chairs facing a small wooden stool and a microphone. People of all ages filled the seats, many with notebooks or tablets ready to jot down inspiration. This is where I gave my first public reading, Zariah whispered to Malcolm. I was terrified. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my paper. What did you read? Malcolm asked. A poem about my grandmother, Zariah said, about the way she used to braid my hair when I was little, telling me stories as her fingers worked. Malcolm smiled, imagining a young Zariah standing nervously at the microphone, finding her voice. I wish I could have seen it. The readings began, a mix of established local poets and newcomers testing their work in public for the first time. Malcolm was surprised by how much he enjoyed it. Some poems were funny, others heartbreaking. All were deeply personal in a way that made him feel privileged to witness. When the official readings ended, there was an open mic session. On impulse, Malcolm leaned over to Zariah. "You should read something." Zariah shook her head. "I didn't prepare anything." "You must know your own poems by heart," Malcolm insisted. "Please? I'd love to hear you." Zariah hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, one poem." She made her way to the front of the room and took the microphone. The crowd murmured in recognition. Clearly she was a favorite here. "This is a new piece," Zariah said. "Still a work in progress. It's called The Dance Continues." She closed her eyes for a moment, gathering herself, then began to speak. Her voice was clear and strong, her words painting vivid images of two strangers meeting under twinkling lights, of broken hearts beginning to mend, of walls slowly coming down brick by brick. Malcolm realized with a start that she was reading a poem about them, about their meeting at the wedding, about the cautious connection they were building. It was beautiful and honest and a little bit frightening in its vulnerability. When Zariah finished, there was a moment of silence before the room erupted in applause. She made her way back to her seat, her eyes seeking Malcolm's. "That was about us," he said quietly. Zariah nodded. "I told you. I write about moments between people that change everything." "Have I changed everything for you?" Malcolm asked. "It's too soon to tell," Zariah replied honestly. "But you've changed something." After the readings, they walked hand in hand through the neighborhood. The night was clear and cool, the streets quiet except for the occasional car passing by. "Thank you for bringing me here," Malcolm said. "I've never experienced anything quite like it." "You've never been to a poetry reading before?" Zariah asked, surprised. Malcolm shook his head. "The closest I've come is listening to tech presentations at conferences. Not quite the same emotional impact." Zariah laughed. "No, I imagine not." They stopped at a small park, sitting on a bench beneath a streetlight. Malcolm turned to face Zariah, his expression serious. "I've been thinking about what you said, about equality in our relationship, about the power imbalance." Zariah tensed slightly. And you're right," Malcolm admitted. "There is a power imbalance. I have more money, more resources, but you have something I don't." "What's that?" "Emotional courage," Malcolm said simply. "You let yourself feel things honestly. You express those feelings in your work. You make yourself vulnerable in ways I've never dared to." Zariah hadn't expected this insight. "I never thought of it that way." "It's true," Malcolm insisted. "I've spent years building walls around myself. Even before Elena's betrayal, I kept parts of myself hidden. My work became my identity. My success became my armor." "And now?" Zariah asked softly. "Now I'm trying to let someone see behind the armor," Malcolm said, reaching up to touch her cheek. "It's terrifying." Zariah leaned into his touch. "Good things often are." Malcolm's eyes dropped to her lips, a question in them. Zariah answered by leaning forward and kissing him, softly at first, then with growing intensity as his arms wrapped around her. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Malcolm rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "I'm falling for you, Zariah Ellis," he whispered. "I know," she replied, a small smile playing at her lips. "I'm falling for you too, Malcolm Ray. God help me." The following week, Malcolm had to travel to New York for business meetings. He and Zariah talked every night by phone, their conversations stretching into the early morning hours as they shared stories from their days and learned more about each other. "I miss you," Malcolm admitted on the third night. "My hotel room feels empty." "You have a suite at the Four Seasons," Zariah teased. "How can it possibly feel empty?" "It doesn't have you in it," Malcolm replied simply. Zariah's heart skipped a beat at his words. "I miss you too," she confessed. "I'll be back tomorrow night," Malcolm said. "Have dinner with me on Friday. I want to cook for you." "You cook?" Zariah asked skeptically. "I have many hidden talents," Malcolm replied, and she could hear the smile in his voice. "All right, Chef Ray, I accept your invitation." On Friday evening, Zariah took a taxi to Malcolm's address, a luxury high-rise in the most exclusive part of San Francisco. The doorman greeted her by name, making her wonder if Malcolm had given him her description. "Mr. Ray is expecting you, Miss Ellis," he said, escorting her to a private elevator, penthouse level. The elevator opened directly into Malcolm's apartment, and Zariah gasped at the view. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the entire city and the bay beyond, glittering with lights as the sun set. "Zariah," Malcolm called, emerging from what appeared to be the kitchen. He wore jeans and a casual button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, a far cry from his usual business attire. He looked younger, more relaxed. He crossed the room and wrapped her in a warm embrace, kissing her with an enthusiasm that made her toes curl. "I missed you," he murmured against her lips. "I can tell," Zoraya replied with a smile. "Something smells good." "That would be my world-famous lasagna," Malcolm said, taking her hand and leading her toward the kitchen. "Well, world-famous in the sense that my mother taught me to make it, and she said it was the best she'd ever tasted." The kitchen was a chef's dream, all stainless steel and marble, with professional-grade appliances. But what caught Zoraya's attention was the table set for two in the corner, with candles and a bottle of wine already open and breathing. "This is lovely," she said, genuinely touched by the effort he'd made. Malcolm poured her a glass of wine. "I wanted to do something special for you, something that didn't involve my money or my status, just me, my time, my effort." Zoraya felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the wine. "Thank you." Dinner was delicious, the lasagna rich and flavorful, accompanied by a salad and garlic bread. They talked and laughed, the ease between them growing with each passing moment. After dinner, Malcolm gave her a tour of the penthouse. It was beautifully decorated but somehow impersonal, like a high-end hotel suite rather than a home. "It's gorgeous," Zoraya said, running her hand along a sleek marble countertop. "But it doesn't feel like you." Malcolm looked around as if seeing the space for the first time. "I know what you mean. I hired a decorator when I bought it. I was barely home anyway, always working. It didn't seem important to make it personal." "And now?" Zoraya asked. Malcolm took her hand. "Now I'm starting to think about what makes a place feel like home. Who makes a place feel like home?" The intensity in his eyes made Zoraya's breath catch. "Malcolm, too fast?" he asked, reading her hesitation. "Maybe a little," she admitted. "We're still getting to know each other." Malcolm nodded, kissing her hand. "At your pace, remember? No pressure." They ended the evening on Malcolm's balcony, wrapped in a blanket against the cool night air, looking out at the city lights. Zoraya rested her head on Malcolm's shoulder, feeling a contentment she hadn't experienced in a long time. "I have to tell you something," Malcolm said suddenly. Zoraya sat up, alarmed by his serious tone. "What is it?" "I've been invited to a technology conference in Paris next month. I'm giving the keynote speech." He paused. "I want you to come with me." "To Paris?" Zoraya repeated, surprised. "Yes. We'd have a few days before the conference to explore the city. I know you've always wanted to go. You mentioned it on our first date." Zoraya was touched that he remembered. "Malcolm, that's a big step. Going away together." "I know," he said, "but I also know that I want to see Paris with you. I want to watch your face when you see the Eiffel Tower for the first time, when you visit Shakespeare and Company Bookstore, when you taste real French pastries." "Separate hotel rooms?" Zoraya asked, still hesitant. "If that's what you want," Malcolm agreed. "Like I said, at your pace." Zoraya thought about it, about Paris with Malcolm, about exploring the city of light with the man who was slowly bringing light back into her life. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll go to Paris with you." Malcolm's face lit up with a smile so genuine it made her heart ache. "Really?" "Really," Zoraya confirmed, "but I'm paying for my own airfare." Malcolm opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again, recognizing the determination in her eyes. "Fine," he conceded. "You can pay for your airfare, but I'm handling the hotel." "Malcolm, the company is paying for my suite anyway," he pointed out. "It doesn't cost any extra if you stay with me." "Separate rooms within the suite," he added quickly, "if that's what you want." Zoraya couldn't help but laugh at his persistence. "You're impossible." "I prefer determined," Malcolm replied with a grin. As Zoraya lay in bed that night in her own apartment, she thought about Malcolm and Paris and the way her life had changed since the night of the wedding. She had gone to that wedding as a favor to her roommate, never expecting to meet someone who would make her question her carefully constructed boundaries. Malcolm Ray was nothing like the men she usually dated. He was wealthy and powerful, used to getting his way, but he was also thoughtful and vulnerable in a way that touched her deeply. When he looked at her, she felt seen in a way she never had before. Paris with Malcolm. The idea both thrilled and terrified her. Was she moving too fast? Was she setting herself up for heartbreak? But as she drifted off to sleep, Zoraya found herself dreaming of cobblestone streets and café au lait, and Malcolm's hand in hers, as they explored the city of love together. The morning of their Paris trip arrived with grey skies and light rain. Malcolm's driver picked up Zoraya at her apartment building, helping her with her single suitcase, while Malcolm waited in the back seat of the black town car. "Good morning," Malcolm said, leaning over to kiss her cheek as she slid in beside him. "Ready for our adventure?" Zariah smiled, the excitement of the trip finally overcoming her nervousness. "Ready, though I still feel guilty about taking time off from classes. Your students will survive without you for a week," Malcolm assured her. "Besides, you left them plenty of reading assignments." "True," Zariah agreed, "and Dr. Peterson practically insisted I go after I mentioned it. I think he's still hoping I'll convince you to make another donation." Malcolm laughed. "I told you, no more surprise donations. I learned my lesson." At the airport, Zariah was surprised when the driver took them not to the main terminal, but to a private hangar. "Malcolm," she said warily as she saw the sleek private jet waiting on the tarmac, "what is this?" "Transportation to Paris," Malcolm replied innocently. "This is not what we agreed on," Zariah reminded him. "I was supposed to pay for my own commercial flight." Malcolm took her hand. "I know, and I was going to honor that, but then I had to move up my keynote to the first day of the conference, which means we need to leave earlier than planned. There weren't any commercial flights available on such short notice." Zariah gave him a skeptical look. "Convenient timing." "I swear it's the truth," Malcolm insisted, though his eyes twinkled with mischief. "Besides, the jet is going to Paris whether you're on it or not. It's the company jet, not my personal one." "You have a personal jet too?" Zariah asked, shaking her head in disbelief. "No," Malcolm admitted, "but the company has two." Zariah couldn't help but laugh. "You're impossible." "So you keep telling me," Malcolm said, squeezing her hand. "Does this mean you'll come?" Zariah looked at the jet, then back at Malcolm's hopeful face. "Fine. But I'm buying you dinner in Paris to make up for it." "Deal," Malcolm agreed quickly. The flight to Paris was unlike anything Zariah had experienced. The private jet was luxuriously appointed with comfortable leather seats, a dining area, and even a small bedroom in the back. The flight attendant served them a gourmet meal with fine wine, and Malcolm worked for part of the flight, while Zariah read a book of French poetry she had brought for the trip. "This is how you always travel?" Zariah asked, still amazed by the luxury. "For international trips, yes," Malcolm said. "It makes it easier to work during the flight, and it's a company expense." Zariah shook her head. "Your world is so different from mine. Sometimes I wonder what you see in a community college teacher who shops at discount stores." Malcolm set aside his laptop and moved to sit beside her. "I see a woman who is passionate and brilliant, who loves what she does and does it well, who sees past my wealth to the person underneath." He took her hand. "Do you know how rare that is in my world? To be seen for who I am, not what I have." Zariah squeezed his hand. "I'm trying to get used to all this. The luxury, the excess. It's just not my world." "Maybe it could be," Malcolm said softly. "Our world, something new we create together." Zariah smiled, touched by his words. "That's quite poetic for a tech CEO." "I've been reading more poetry lately," Malcolm admitted with a grin. "I have this amazing teacher." They arrived in Paris in the early evening. A car was waiting to take them to their hotel, the famous Ritz on the Place Vendôme. Zariah gasped when she saw the ornate facade of the historic building. "Malcolm, this is too much," she protested. "It's where I always stay when I'm in Paris for business," Malcolm said. "The company has an account here." "Of course it does," Zariah murmured, still overwhelmed by the opulence. Their suite was breathtaking, a large living area with antique furniture, crystal chandeliers, and a balcony overlooking the square. As promised, there were 2 separate bedrooms, each with its own marble bathroom. "What do you think?" Malcolm asked as Zariah walked around the suite in wonder. "It's like a palace," she said. "I feel like I should be wearing a ball gown instead of jeans." Malcolm laughed. "Wear whatever makes you comfortable, but if you do want a ball gown, I'm sure the concierge could arrange something." Zariah threw a pillow at him. "Don't you dare! I'm already feeling out of place enough." Despite her jet lag, Zariah couldn't bear the thought of wasting their first night in Paris. After freshening up, she and Malcolm went for a walk along the Seine. The lights of the city reflected on the dark water, and street musicians played romantic songs on accordions and guitars. "It's even more beautiful than I imagined," Zariah said, as they stopped on a bridge to look at the illuminated Notre Dame Cathedral in the distance. "Yes, it is," Malcolm agreed, though he was looking at her rather than the view. They had a late dinner at a small bistro Malcolm knew from previous trips. The owner greeted him warmly and gave them a quiet table in the corner where they could talk privately. "To Paris," Malcolm said, raising his glass of wine. "To Paris," Zariah echoed, clinking her glass against his. Over the next 3 days they explored the city together. They visited the Louvre, where Zariah stood entranced before the Mona Lisa. They climbed the steps of Montmartre to the Sacré-Cœur Basilica and admired the view of the city spread out below them. They wandered through the Shakespeare and Company bookstore, where Zariah found a rare edition of poems by a French author she admired. "Let me buy it for you," Malcolm said when he saw her reluctantly return the book to the shelf after checking the price. "Malcolm, it's too expensive," Zariah protested. "Please," Malcolm insisted, "let me give you this one thing, a memory of our trip." Zariah hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you. It's a beautiful gift." Each night, they returned to their suite, saying goodnight at their separate bedroom doors. Malcolm never pressured Zariah for more, respecting her desire to take things slowly. But the attraction between them grew stronger with each passing day. On the fourth day of their trip, Malcolm had to attend the technology conference. Zariah spent the morning exploring on her own, visiting small art galleries and sitting in cafes, writing in her journal. In the afternoon, she decided to surprise Malcolm by attending his keynote speech. The conference was held at a modern convention center on the outskirts of the city. Zariah slipped into the back of the auditorium just as Malcolm was being introduced. She had never seen him in his professional element before, and she was curious to see this side of him. Malcolm took the stage to enthusiastic applause. He looked handsome and confident in his tailored suit, completely at ease in front of the large audience. His speech was about the future of technology and personal privacy, a topic he was passionate about. Zariah watched with pride as he articulated complex ideas with clarity and conviction. After the speech, there was a reception in the lobby. Zariah hung back, observing as people crowded around Malcolm, eager to speak with him. He was gracious with everyone, giving each person his full attention. Zariah was about to approach him when she noticed a beautiful blonde woman in an expensive suit place her hand on Malcolm's arm in a familiar gesture. The woman leaned in to whisper something in his ear, and Malcolm laughed. A twinge of insecurity shot through Zariah. The woman was clearly part of Malcolm's world, polished, sophisticated, at ease in this setting of wealth and power. Zariah suddenly felt out of place in her simple dress and flat shoes. Before she could approach, another woman joined the conversation, tall, elegant, with perfectly styled dark hair. Zariah recognized her immediately from photos online. Elena, Malcolm's ex-fiancée, the woman who had left him for his business partner. Zariah froze, watching as Elena said something to Malcolm, her expression serious. Malcolm's face hardened, his posture becoming rigid. The blonde woman looked uncomfortable, excusing herself from the conversation. Zariah couldn't hear what was being said, but it was clearly intense. After a few minutes, Malcolm shook his head firmly and turned away from Elena. As he did, his eyes scanned the room and landed on Zariah. His expression transformed instantly from anger to surprise to joy. He quickly made his way through the crowd toward her. "Zariah," he said, reaching for her hands. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to see you in action," Zariah explained. "Your speech was amazing, so passionate and intelligent." Malcolm beamed at her praise. "Thank you. I'm so glad you came." He glanced over his shoulder at Elena, who was watching them with narrowed eyes, though the timing is a bit awkward. "I saw," Zariah said. "That was Elena." Malcolm nodded. "She's here with Jeffrey. Their company is a competitor now. She wanted to discuss a potential collaboration, but I'm not interested in working with them." "Are you okay?" Zariah asked, noting the tension in his jaw. "I am now that you're here," Malcolm said, his expression softening. "Let's get out of here." "I've done my duty for today." They left the conference center hand in hand. As they waited for their car, Zariah saw Elena watching them from the entrance, her expression unreadable. "She's staring at us," Zariah murmured. "Let her," Malcolm said, pulling Zariah closer. "I don't care what she thinks anymore." That evening they had dinner at the famous Jules Verne restaurant in the Eiffel Tower. As promised, Zariah insisted on paying, though she winced at the prices. "You don't have to do this," Malcolm said as she handed her credit card to the waiter. "Yes, I do," Zariah insisted. "I want to contribute something to this trip. I want us to be equals, even if it means I eat ramen for a month when I get home." Malcolm smiled, reaching across the table to take her hand. "You are my equal, Zariah, in all the ways that matter." After dinner, they went to the observation deck to look out at the city lights. Paris spread out below them, a glittering tapestry of lights and shadow. "What did Elena say to you?" Zariah asked suddenly. "At the reception, it seemed intense." Malcolm sighed. "She said she made a mistake, that she misses me. that things with Jeffrey aren't working out. Zariah felt a cold knot form in her stomach. And what did you say? I told her it was too late, Malcolm said simply. That I've moved on, that I've found someone who sees me for who I really am, not what I can give her. Zariah felt the knot dissolve, replaced by a warm glow. You said that? I did, Malcolm confirmed. And I meant it. He turned to face her fully. Seeing Elena today, I realized something. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not hurt. I'm just grateful. Grateful, Zariah repeated, confused. If she hadn't left me, if she hadn't betrayed me, I would never have been sitting alone at that wedding, Malcolm explained. You would never have asked me to dance. We would never have met. Zariah smiled at the memory. The wedding seems like a lifetime ago. In some ways it was, Malcolm said. I was a different person then, broken, guarded. And now? Zariah asked softly. Now I'm healing, Malcolm said. Because of you. Because you showed me that I didn't have to hurt alone. He pulled her into his arms, and they stood wrapped together, the lights of Paris twinkling around them. When Malcolm kissed her, Zariah felt a sense of rightness, of coming home. Back at the hotel, they paused outside their separate bedroom doors. Good night, Zariah, Malcolm said, his voice husky. Actually, Zariah said, taking his hand, I was thinking maybe I don't want to sleep alone tonight. Malcolm's eyes darkened. Are you sure? Zariah nodded. I'm sure. I'm ready, Malcolm. He pulled her into his arms, kissing her deeply. I think I've been ready since the moment you asked me to dance. The next morning, Zariah woke to find Malcolm watching her, a soft smile on his face. Good morning, he said, brushing a curl from her forehead. Good morning, she replied, stretching contentedly. Any regrets? Malcolm asked, a hint of vulnerability in his voice. None, Zariah assured him, curling against his side. You? Only that we waited so long, Malcolm said, kissing the top of her head. Their remaining days in Paris were a blur of happiness. They visited the gardens of Versailles, took a boat ride on the Seine, and spent an afternoon at a small cafe talking for hours over coffee and pastries. At night, they returned to their suite, to the same bedroom, holding each other close as they fell asleep. On their last night in Paris, Malcolm took Zariah to a small exclusive jazz club in Saint-Germain-des-Prés. The atmosphere was intimate, with candlelit tables and a trio playing soulful music on a small stage. I have something for you, Malcolm said, reaching into his pocket. Malcolm, Zariah protested, you've given me enough. This whole trip has been a gift. This is different, Malcolm insisted, placing a small velvet box on the table. Zariah's eyes widened. Malcolm, it's not what you think, he said quickly. Open it. With trembling fingers, Zariah opened the box. Inside was a delicate silver key on a chain. A key? She asked, confused. To my penthouse, Malcolm explained. I want you to have it. To come and go as you please, to make it feel like home, our home if you want. Zariah stared at the key, understanding the significance of the gesture. This is a big step. I know, Malcolm said, and if it's too soon, I understand. But I love you, Zariah Ellis. I want to build a life with you. Tears filled Zariah's eyes. I love you too, Malcolm. She leaned across the table to kiss him, the key clutched tightly in her hand. Is that a yes? Malcolm asked when they broke apart. It's a yes to the key, Zariah clarified, but let's take the rest one day at a time. I still have my apartment, my job, my life. Of course, Malcolm agreed. I don't want to change who you are. I just want to be part of your life, and I want you to be part of mine. I'd like that, Zariah said, slipping the chain around her neck. The key rested just below her collarbone, catching the light as she moved. It was a promise, a beginning, a door opening to a future they would build together. 3 months after their return from Paris, Malcolm and Zariah attended another wedding at the same Napa Valley vineyard where they had met. This time, it was for Lisa, Zariah's roommate, who was marrying her longtime boyfriend. Strange to be back here, Malcolm commented as they found their seats for the ceremony. So much has happened since that night. Zariah squeezed his hand. Good things. The ceremony was beautiful, with the vineyard in full bloom around them. During the reception, the band began to play a slow song, the same one that had been playing the night Malcolm and Zariah first danced together. Zariah leaned close to Malcolm's ear and whispered, "Dance with me, just so we remember how it started." Malcolm smiled, rising to his feet and taking her hand. "No," he said, leading her to the dance floor. "Let's dance, so we know what we've built." As they swayed together under the twinkling lights, Malcolm held Zariah close, marveling at how fate had brought them together in this very spot. He had come to Elena's wedding broken and alone, never imagining that he would find love with a poetry teacher who had seen past his wealth to the man beneath. "What are you thinking about?" Zariah asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. "I'm thinking about how one moment can change everything," Malcolm replied. "One dance, one conversation, one person brave enough to approach a stranger in pain." "I'm glad I was brave that night," Zariah said softly. "So am I," Malcolm agreed. "I was hurting so much, and you showed me I didn't have to hurt alone." "No one should have to hurt alone," Zariah said. "Not when there's someone willing to stand beside them." Malcolm twirled her gently, then pulled her back into his arms. "I plan to stand beside you for a very long time, Zariah Ellis." "Is that a promise, Malcolm Ray?" Zariah asked with a smile. "It's more than that," Malcolm said, his eyes serious. "It's a vow." As the song ended, Malcolm led Zariah away from the dance floor and out onto the path between the vineyard rows. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the vines. They stopped beneath the wooden trellis where they had talked the night they met. Malcolm reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box, different from the one he had given her in Paris. "Malcolm," Zariah breathed, her heart racing. "I know it's only been a few months," Malcolm said, his voice steady despite his obvious nervousness. "But when you know, and I know that I want to spend the rest of my life with you." He opened the box to reveal a ring, not the massive diamond one might expect from a billionaire, but a more modest ring with a sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. "I chose this because it reminded me of your eyes," Malcolm explained. "The way they shine when you're talking about poetry or your students or something you're passionate about." Tears filled Zariah's eyes as Malcolm dropped to one knee. "Zariah Ellis, will you marry me? Not because I'm rich or because you're beautiful, but because together we're better than we ever could be apart. Because you make me want to be worthy of your love every day." Zariah nodded, too overcome with emotion to speak. Malcolm slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into his arms. "Is that a yes?" he whispered against her hair. "Yes," Zariah managed through her tears. "Yes, I'll marry you, Malcolm Ray." Malcolm kissed her, pouring all his love and gratitude into the embrace. When they finally broke apart, they stood with their foreheads touching, both smiling through tears of joy. "I never expected this when I went to that wedding," Zariah admitted. "I just wanted to see the vineyard, maybe drink some expensive champagne, and I never expected to find the love of my life while nursing a broken heart," Malcolm replied. "Life is full of surprises." "Good surprises," Zariah agreed, looking down at the ring on her finger. "The best," Malcolm said, kissing her again. As they walked back toward the reception, hand in hand, Zariah thought about the poem she had written after they first met, about strangers becoming something more, about pain becoming healing, about walls coming down brick by brick. She had titled it, "You Don't Have to Hurt Alone." Now, with Malcolm beside her, she knew she never would again. The end.